HPA engines offer the best performance out of any guns on the field. You can adjust the rate of fire, the BB velocity, the fire mode, it has instant trigger response, it needs very little maintenance, and it's quieter than an AEG without shimming little gears to make your gun not sound like a blender. HPA does have two downsides though. The first is that you need to carry a fuel source of some kind, which can be bulky and heavy and potentially slow you down on the field. But that's not a performance issue, that's a skill issue. And maybe if you hit the gym every once in a while, you wouldn't complain about that like a skinny bitch.
The second issue with HPA has always been the dinero, the moolah, the bones, the clams, the price. You see, big HPA keeps a grip on their patents tighter than a hamster's pussy, which lets them keep their prices high and competition low, and that's where I come in.
Originally, I just wanted to make an HPA engine for my own personal use, because I knew I could do it cheaper than buying one.
Wrong.
I'm what you call overconfident in my abilities. About 4 years ago, I began development on my own HPA engine, and I had two main objectives: keep the part count low, keep the performance high. To meet those requirements, I started with a design inspired by the Kuba T1000. The design is really simple. The airflow comes in from the back and is controlled by a solenoid. So what happens when you pull the trigger? The solenoid will turn on and begin to pressurize the back of the nozzle. The air can't escape yet because of this plug, but when the nozzle is all the way forwards, the plug is no longer sealing. This allows the air to flow through and fire your BB. When the solenoid closes, the air that's left in the system has to bleed through the nozzle, and then at a certain point, the spring force is strong enough to retract the nozzle. There's a few big design flaws with this. The first is that all of the air pressure is translated directly into loading force, which means your BB is going to be smacked with the power of 1,000 farts. The second issue is that since all the air that fires your BB is supplied by the solenoid, you have to have a high flow solenoid for this design to function properly. The third problem is you have to wait for all the air to deplete before the spring will be strong enough to retract the nozzle, and this negatively affects your rate of fire. I made a prototype with this design and it worked pretty well. It fed properly, it was accurate, it was quiet, but the FPS was underwhelming, and I knew I needed to make some changes in order to bump those numbers up.
Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
After some mild success with version 1, hey, I at least got it to fire and feed consistently. I was considering what it would be like to sell my engine as a commercial product, which added 2 more requirements to my list of objectives. I need to come up with a design I can legally sell.
And the most important requirement is to undercut the competition.
This is where I suffered from COVID. No, I wasn't sick. I had COVID supply chain issues. I had been getting quotes from Max solenoids, which are the same ones that Wolverine and Polar Star use. Unfortunately, in the middle of this process, they raised their prices and said it was because of COVID. One of my goals is to make a more affordable option, and this just isn't going to be possible with an expensive high-flow solenoid. If you remember 5 seconds ago,
you have to have a high-flow solenoid for this design to function properly.
But what if I came up with a design that doesn't need a high-flow solenoid?
This began my hunt for a more refined design, and my journey to learn about fluid dynamics was underway.
I started the design process over 7 freaking times, and each version had dozens, if not hundreds, of prototype parts machined or 3D printed. That adds up. I feel like I'm Scrooge McDuck with all these parts. I started prototyping with FDM printed parts, but they have thick layer lines, which meant it couldn't hold a constant air seal. This meant that it worked for prototyping the Kuba T1000 style engine, it wouldn't work for more complicated designs. To continue my testing, I ended up buying an SLA printer, which uses super small layer lines, but unfortunately, this didn't have the durability that I needed, and it also doesn't print overhangs very well. When you're prototyping, 3D printing can only take you so far, and eventually I had to start machining parts. In this case, hiring a machining service to make parts for me, which is expensive and slow as fuck. But figuring out the electronics design is not something that's in my wheelhouse. So the development of the fire control unit was an entirely different story. I ended up outsourcing all the FCU design to Fiverr. I found someone who was willing to do it, and within a few weeks I had a finished PCB design, and then after I got the prototypes made, they didn't work. Okay, so maybe I can just have him revise it? He stopped responding. Okay, maybe choosing someone off of Fiverr to do my FCU design was a bad idea. I admit that. I'll take it on the chin, I'll hire someone else. I decided to go with an American company because one, I wouldn't have to deal with the language barrier, and two, I know I'm gonna get a good product because if they don't deliver, I get my money back. It's a great scenario. I outsourced to India. The language barrier was in fact still a problem. That's okay, I can deal with this. I don't care if it's outsourced. I don't care about the language barrier. I can put up with that as long as the product works and has the features we agreed to. It did not work or have the features we agreed to.
No, sir, we did not agree to write code for you. We agreed to make the PCB. That is all we say we will do. You have to pay more money if you want any code.
It doesn't have the fucking features if it doesn't have the code! What do you think is going on here? That's not how it fucking works!
I paid them more money. That's fine, as long as it works. It still didn't work. They sent me code, and I paid basically $1,000 for 2 prototypes. This isn't the design work that I'm paying for, this is just the PCB prototypes. And they didn't work either. So that was fun. I had to pay them again to fix the code they sent me, which I already paid for, and they eventually got it working. At this point, I decided to cut ties with the company because they kept moving goalposts and not delivering on the promises that they made. This time, I stopped responding. The files they sent me worked, and I decided to order 600 units.
Cause I'm a frickin' dumb little shite!
I at least had the foresight to pay for testing services, so while PCBWay made the parts, they would have to confirm that they worked before sending them to me. The testing was going really bad, so I had them send me 25 out of the 600 units, and I used those for testing to find what the issue was. I took them to my friend Ben, who owns Delta Plus Prototyping, and he knows his way around a circuit board. Turns out the parts that the company used to make the prototypes were not the same parts that they told me to use, so they gave me a fake bill of materials.
They took so much of my frickin' money!
Once we found the issue, we at least had a path forwards. I had to pay PCBWay to remanufacture all of the PCBs. At least they didn't have to do it from scratch. They could just switch out the one defective component. This wasn't cheap, but it had to be done. And they finally passed testing. During this whole fire control unit fiasco, more like fire control unit, I had gotten the engine to a point where it was mostly finalized, but not entirely. And I already had enough parts to make 500 units.
Why would I buy that many parts before the design was frickin' finalized?
I was scared to fully release the engine because I didn't know what issues were gonna arise, and I really didn't want to deal with 500 returns. Basically, I had hit a wall, and that wall's name was free time. I didn't have enough time to do enough builds and enough platforms and fire enough rounds to have enough confidence to sell this as a completed product. But I wasn't gonna just sell them and pray that they worked. I actually was praying a lot throughout this process. Most of my prayer revolved around me asking God to help finish this project. And eventually that prayer was answered in a way that I didn't expect. It was answered through a Facebook notification. It was early May in 2023, and that Facebook notification was literally just an invite to a group chat for Airsoft techs. I don't even know how or why I was invited, but I accepted the invite, and the conversation shifted to HPA. What better market research than sharing pictures of my product to the Airsoft group chat? People were really excited, and all of a sudden I was blown up with messages from people who wanted to test it. So I started a Discord server and took applications. I can't think of anything that would be a better answer to that prayer. I suddenly had the excitement, motivation, and assistance to get the project done. While the applications to be a beta tester were rolling in, I did one final, very important round of testing. Longevity testing. I took one of my engines and rigged it up with a custom FCU inside a Pelican case and ran it basically day and night. The Pelican case was to make it a little quieter and hopefully not piss off my roommates. The way the test worked is the custom FCU would run the engine for a few thousand rounds. After that, I'd be able to inspect it and see if any problems showed up. For thousands of rounds, I had no issues, but consistently around the 40,000 round mark, it needed to be relubricated. That's a pretty long time between pit stops, but I knew I could do better. The second problem I found was more unexpected. The spring on the nozzle is free floating, and in each shot it compresses the spring between the nozzle and the pressure cap. This is a pretty mild impact, but after hundreds of thousands of rounds, it had slowly deformed the pressure cap until it crimped around the nozzle, making it immobile. Obviously, that's not good. I didn't have a good solution for this. All I had to do was add one more O-ring to act as a buffer between the spring and the pressure cap, so now they don't even make contact at all. To solve the lubrication issue, we need to look at the nozzle design itself. When I add lubricant, I'm always adding it to the O-ring. As the nozzle moves forwards, it pushes the lubricant to the edge, and when it moves back, it pushes the lubricant here. Over time, the lubrication will spread out and you won't have it where you need it. I didn't have a good solution for this. Psych! Just adding an O-ring here fixes that problem too. Originally, we used one O-ring to meet my arbitrary design requirements. Part count low, but it turns out adding an O-ring here both increases efficiency and resolves the lubrication issue. With the updated nozzle, we still have to lubricate both O-rings, but this time, instead of spreading the lube back and forth until there's none left, it spreads it between these two O-rings and they constantly replenish each other. I ran the longevity test again with this nozzle, and this time it ran for over 1 million rounds without needing any relubrication, and the buffer O-ring successfully prevented any damage to the pressure cap. With both of these problems resolved, I ordered a new batch of nozzles and let the beta testers know that orders were going to be opening up very soon. After the nozzles arrived, I opened up orders, and the first shipment did have problems, but they weren't actually engine problems off the bat. The main issue was USPS. I've told this story before, but the packaging that the Phoenix comes in was originally designed to be a mailing tube. The problem is, USPS employees subconsciously thought this was a Nerf football, and a few of the packages got busted open during shipping. Since there was no bag on the outside to catch the parts once the mailing tube was busted open, people got some empty mailing tubes, and that was not ideal. So issue 1 with the beta is I had to send out replacement engines and figure out a new way to ship the packages. Once everyone did have their engines, data rolled in like a fat man down a staircase. This first round of beta testers found 2 main issues. The first one is that the aluminum nozzle was causing some extra friction and would slowly wear away with time. This was an easy fix. My early prototype nozzles were made with Delrin, and the only reason I was using aluminum nozzles was for cosmetic reasons. I thought the silver looked cool. That's not a good reason to have metal on metal contact. So fix number 1 is order nozzles made of low friction polymer instead of aluminum. The second issue was with the FCU. Unfortunately, the code was not quite as polished as it needed to be. That doesn't surprise me in the slightest. That fix was incredibly easy for me, because I passed it off to Ben from Delta Plus Prototyping again. He updated the code for me, and bada bing bada boom, here we are. The deal that I had made with the beta testers was that if they bought a beta kit, they would be able to have any parts that went through changes for free. So this deal ensured that anyone who bought a beta kit, even if it was unfinished in the beginning, would have access to a finished product at the end of the process. So the first update kit included a new FCU with updated firmware and a Delrin nozzle. This resolved the 2 main issues we found in the beginning and allowed the beta testers to continue hunting down any other flaws in the design. The next major modification was a minor adjustment to the solenoid body. The first batch of solenoids had a throw length that was approximately 0.8 millimeters too long, and this actually had a big effect on efficiency. One beta tester from the Discord, who I'm pretty sure was a furry, got really mad about the poor efficiency. He blew up at me in the Discord and was screeching about how the engine was not ready to be sold, and he wouldn't recommend it to anyone in a million years, and the efficiency needs to be fixed before it can be considered a finished product. And I was like, yeah, that's why I'm beta testing it, in order to find the issues. At the very least, he brought the issue to my attention, and for that, I am grateful. All he has to do is wait while the parts get manufactured, and I will send him a new... He left the beta. My guy, if you're out there and you see this video, DM me in the Discord again, and I'll get you a new solenoid body. When beta testers got their hands on the new update kits and were able to test the efficiency for themselves, they were much happier. Understandably so, because now the efficiency is comparable to a Jack or a Polar Star F1, and I'm perfectly happy with that level of efficiency, considering the Phoenix is over $100 cheaper than both those options. The FCU that I requested from the Chicago engineering firm was only compatible with V2 gearboxes, similar to the Wolverine Spartan, and a lot of the beta testers were requesting an FCU that was compatible with AKs and other platforms. I asked Ben if he'd be willing to help me by rearranging the components on the FCU so we could use Polar Star trigger boards. He ended up going above and beyond, choosing superior components and reducing the overall footprint so that the FCU was smaller and better. The new FCU performed the exact same task, but since it was compatible with Polar Star style trigger boards, it was also compatible with way more platforms. Now we could sell M4 and AK kits, as well as all the other platforms that use V2 and V3 gearboxes. I'm sure we'll add even more trigger boards in the future, but a little self-plug, we have some really exciting stuff coming soon, so if you want to find out about it when it comes out, I recommend subscribing or joining the Discord. The beta program helped outsource a lot of the torture testing and compatibility confirmation. Despite this assistance, there's only so many hours in the day, and I was still wearing thin. I was able to find time to ship orders to people who bought beta kits, but I wasn't able to find time for much else relating to Backdraft Innovations, and I realized if I didn't allocate more time to it, it could fizzle out and die. Obviously, I felt safe with a salaried position. I was able to clock in, clock out, and get paid on a regular schedule. On the other hand, Backdraft Innovations was stagnating, and I remembered a quote echoing in the back of my mind. I looked up the quote to find out who said it for this video, and it turned out to be Kevin O'Leary, the guy from Shark Tank. A salary is the drug your employers feed you to forget your dreams. For 3 years, I had become addicted. Addicted to the safety, the comfort, the schedule, and that's just not me. I'm a risk taker, and I'd slowly formed a habit that didn't align with my character. I knew I had to choose between my job and the business I'd been building for 3 years. At the same time, my wedding was only a few months away, and if this risk didn't pay off, I was risking more than just my own livelihood. I also knew that quitting my job would be exponentially more terrifying after getting married, so it was time for one last push. To help make up my mind, I took a few days off work so I could make a video about the Phoenix. I figured that if I could remind myself that other people were also excited about the project, it would make my decision easier. I showed off my engine, how to install it, and answered some frequently asked questions. Most importantly, to get the word out as much as possible, I hosted a giveaway. My sales saw a huge boost. Of course, I knew this boost was temporary and it was directly tied to views on the YouTube video, which would taper off. But it also gave me the confidence that you guys wanted to see me succeed, and that this is a product you guys have been waiting for. One of the biggest confidence boosters came when retailers from around the world began reaching out to me. I knew I was ready to make a decision. Hey, is your schedule open at 3:30 for an exit interview? Yep, I can do that. Cool, thanks. Did you hear? That idiot quit.
Finally, he was a freaking retard.
After quitting my job, I made another YouTube video, letting people know that I was going to be releasing the Phoenix officially, and that the beta was coming to a close. Now that I'm able to dedicate my full attention to Backdraft Innovations, and the beta testers had helped me weed out all the issues, it was time to make it official. I packed a bunch of engines so that they could be shipped out while I was on my honeymoon. Luckily, I packed enough, but I sold out pretty quick after getting home. Most of my suppliers needed about a month to get new parts to me. Unfortunately, one of them needed a lot longer. I had a few engines that I was saving for retailers, and I ended up taking them to Bolt Bash, and I sold the very last one right as we were taking down our tent. This didn't concern me too much because I knew most of my parts would show up while I was on this trip. What did concern me was the bed bug bites I got at my hotel. When I got home from Bolt Bash, I bug bombed my car and then got to work assembling parts. Bed bugs don't stop the grind. My bloodstream was pumped full of caffeine and antibiotics, and I assembled HPA engines like a madman. With engines restocked and flying off the shelves, what's next for Backdraft Innovations? The first thing I need to do is stabilize my supply chain. One thing I'd like to do is start making parts in-house, but for now the priority is making sure I don't run out of any parts. The second thing I need to do is streamline assembly. This might mean redesigning some parts to be easier to put together, or possibly design tools, jigs, and automated machines that can do certain steps for me. One thing I really don't want is to stay in Illinois forever, and it would make sense to relocate before hiring employees or buying 10-ton industrial CNC machines. I do not want to move a 10-ton industrial CNC machine to another state. In regards to new products, we have a few coming down the pipeline, and each one is going to have their own announcement video, as well as their own beta program if you want to be a tester for them. For example, we've been developing a Bluetooth FCU, which is one of the most feature-packed on the market, and it's also going to be one of the most affordable. I have 2 other products that I can't talk about yet. Pay no attention to the shotgun shells on the floor. So subscribe and join the beta Discord if you want in on the action. All in all, I have a lot of faith in where we're headed, and I can't wait to displace the big HPA giants that have been holding us airsofters by the balls for far too long. Oh, and for the people who entered the last giveaway, these are the winners. If you're one of these winners, leave a comment down below so we can get in touch. Any of these engines that aren't claimed by the time the next video goes up, I'm gonna do another drawing. So if you want to enter that giveaway, share this video and leave a comment. I've dedicated almost my entire adult life to this project, and I want nothing more than to make an impact. So thank you all for the support and for watching this video. Consider picking one up at backdraftinnovations.com, or just share the video with a friend or a group chat who you think might enjoy it. Later.